some sort of a thumbnail sketch of his life.
It is, and this is, we're talking about a man here who for basically the last quarter or the last third of his life went on record as basically saying that he was having an ongoing dialogue with angelic beings.
That's right.
But this man comes from a very, very academic background and was indeed highly respected in Sweden. He was involved with the government.
That's right.
He was in charge of the mining industry, developing the mining industry.
That's right. He was an assessor for the Board of Mines. That's right.
During his time, and a fellow that was very involved with science. I heard that he worked out some math that had to do with calculating based on the moon, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
So he was. This was a very pragmatic man, a contemporary of Isaac Newton's, as you said, a Renaissance man.
That's right.
That had a proven. Had a life that had been devoted to scholarly pursuit.
That's right, and was quite famous. He was famous enough that his movements were recorded in the local papers and that sort of thing. He'd really become an established philosopher and a scientist at the cutting edge of what was going on in Europe at the time.
But this is a very difficult. I mean, I was talking to you a little before the show, and we were talking about this is obviously a mystical experience. It fits.
Yeah.
It fits in terms of its mystical characteristics, but yet there seems to be an aversion to talk about it, about his work as mystical writings. They're theological writings. There seems to be an inherent kind of schizophrenia about this. What is it they say that if you talk to God, that's prayer. If God talks to you, it's schizophrenia.
That's right. That's right. And he definitely went over that line to where there's a voice coming back. And
well, I mean, how would you deal with that? I mean, my investigation of the new church and the people in it seems to be a very intellectual, erudite group of people. If someone came to you in your congregation today and said that they were having an ongoing dialogue with God, how would you handle that?
Well, I think it's interesting because I'm chaplain at Bryn Athyn College, and sometimes students come to me with their spiritual experiences and this sort of thing, but it's in a whispered voice. Mm-hmm. It's not within the new church. It's not within certain aspects of it anyway. It's not something that mystical experience is not sought. It's not sort of publicly, oh, yes, I had this experience or that experience. Sometimes before somebody dies, they might see something beautiful and then talk about it. But generally speaking, people don't see themselves as being on anything like Swedenborg's path, mm-hmm. which seems ironic to me because I feel that Swedenborg is a role model. He's better than a lot of other role models that you could have, and he really lived an intense life, a life of belief in God, a life of pursuit, a life of usefulness to his country and to the other nations in Europe, and this is where he ended up. I don't think he expected to go where he went. I think he was surprised by joy, to borrow Lewis's phrase, or possibly shocked by it. I'm not sure, but he ended up somewhere he hadn't expected to go. It intrigues me.
No, please. But Campbell and Jung talk about this possibility where the conscious opens, and the person, the being, the consciousness falls into the subconscious.
Yeah, it's one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is Swedenborg's ideas about the very beginning of Genesis, where it talks about 7 days of creation. Mm-hmm. And he sees this as not being literally true of physical creation, but that these foreshadow stages in human development. And you start out empty and void, and the Spirit of God is hovering on the faces of the waters. And then there's a gradual development of an increasing spiritual life. Mm-hmm. And what I've been thinking a lot about lately is what he speaks of as the seventh day of creation. I think Swedenborg's someone who reached the seventh day of creation, and not many people do. And he writes a lot about the pain that's involved in pursuing a path like this. If you have the willingness to follow to that degree, it's pain that takes you from the fourth day to the fifth day, and pain, crisis, spiritual crisis that takes you from the fifth day to the sixth day and the sixth day to the seventh day. And the nature of the seventh day is what I think Swedenborg would call truly human, but I think it's something that most people have not encountered, haven't even thought of the idea of there being people who are in this kind of state. When he talks about the nature of the seventh day, he talks about being in the Lord and the Lord in him. He talks about there's a state he describes, it's prayer from the Lord to the Lord, where the self is hardly even in the picture, and where whatever you desire is done, which it talks about in the Gospel of John. And so that as I read his accounts of spiritual experiences, other people in his spiritual experiences in the spiritual world are praying, but he doesn't pray. He simply desires.